Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's presentation. My name is Brianna Lovell Myers, and I am the Executive Director of United Spay Alliance. We are located in the United States, and we are working to promote affordable and accessible spay and neuter services. We are also working to promote timely spay-neuter services, which is the focus of today's presentation, all about our Feline Fix by 5 campaign and how we are working to shift the norm, and we'll talk more about that. And so I want to give a shout out to Miss Fiona Girl, who is on your screen. Fiona is our spokescat for the Feline Fix by 5 campaign, and she and I are just delighted to be here with you today. So as I said, we are working to shift the norm here in the United States with our Feline Fix by 5 months campaign. Currently, the norm, the broad norm, when you look at the veterinary industry or professionals, especially in our general practice or private practice, the norm is to recommend spay and neuter at 6 months of age. And for various reasons that we'll discuss, but our campaign seeks to shift that recommendation from 6 months, where it's at, down to 5 months. So just asking veterinarians to back it up by 4 weeks and build consensus throughout the veterinary industry, throughout animal rescue, welfare, anyone who works with animals, feline fix by 5 months is the way to go. So it's a very clear message. This campaign was built around the recommendations put forth by a veterinary task force who reviewed all the data, the science, and those recommendations have since been endorsed by the American Veterinary Medical Association, or the AVMA, along with many, many others. And so that's the framing that I want you to have for this presentation. Our campaign is just that 4 weeks. We're asking folks to shift their recommendation from 6 down to 5. And so why are we doing this? So the Feline Fix by 5 campaign, it was an idea that started with Esther Meckler, who is the founder and the president of United Spay Alliance. Previously, she founded Spay USA, which was a directory and is a directory of spay and neuter resources. It was the first of its kind here in the United States, making it easy for folks to find help to get their pets sterilized, especially at a time before Google made it so convenient to look things up. And so she had founded and built this work around spay and neuter. She and her contemporaries were promoting spay and neuter as a norm and a best practice, encouraging everyone to spay and neuter your pets. But then this survey, or the results of this survey, was released back in about 2009, 2011, which showed that 73% of people either do not know or think that 6 months or later was when a pet should be spayed or neutered. So after decades of work together, Esther and her contemporaries looked at each other and went, uh-oh, we talked about spay and neuter, but we forgot to mention when. And as we know, the when is a very critical piece of the puzzle. The timing matters. We know kittens can become pregnant as early as 4 months, but when vets are saying to wait until 6 months or even later, then you have this gap. And of course, what happens when you have unsterilized cats and kittens running around? You have, oops, litters. And just a quick statistic here, this gap exists today, and we had 2.9 million cats enter shelters in 2024. And of those, 57%, that's over half, were kittens under 5 months of age. And this is data from Shelter Animals Count. And this is just accounting for those cats and kittens that even went into rescues and shelters. It does not account for all of the kittens that ended up in homes in other ways and never touched the rescues, right? And so we have plenty of kittens in the United States. But think, if we could just shift that recommendation from 6 months down to 5 months, if we could add prevention between the 4 and the 6 there, think of that ripple effect, right? If we could close the spay gap, we would have fewer of those unwanted or accidental litters, which is going to have an impact on our overall shelter intake, on our euthanasia rates. We would see fewer stray and abandoned or homeless cats on the street. You would see benefits to overall public health, cost savings to our municipalities. This says nothing, of the impact on compassion fatigue among folks in the space who are working with cats and kittens every day. The list goes on and on. So if we could close the spay gap, we could watch that ripple effect for the better. So what's the issue, right? If we know Fix by 5 can have all of these wonderful, wonderful implications, then what's really the problem? Well, people still don't know when to spay and neuter. And when they don't know, they're not coming to us. They're not coming to folks who are working in shelters or rescues or animal orgs like ours. They're asking their veterinarians. And then the veterinarians are making the recommendations off of some outdated norms. At least here in the US, there is no standard age for spay and neuter that is being taught. For cats, it is a big kind of gray area. There is no consensus throughout the industry. Usually, the recommendation is something that they have learned, like mentor to mentee. They've picked it up somewhere along the line. But again, the science says, and it has been endorsed by the AVMA, feline Fix by 5 is the way to go. So our audience has to be those veterinarians, especially the general practice and the private practice veterinarians. I will pause here to say, if you're thinking, what about 2 pounds, 2 months? In my clinic, we're already spaying and neutering kittens at 8 weeks old. What about that? And I say, that's terrific. That is absolutely wonderful. And this campaign supports that. It is an extension of that. We think that that is a wonderful guidepost. We know that it is becoming or is a best practice in the shelter and rescue world. But this campaign is really looking at those cats that are outside of that rescue space. So the owned cats who are already in homes, who are seeing a private practice veterinarian, we want them to hear this message too. We want them to receive spay and neuter before 6 months too. And so this campaign goes beyond just our sheltering space and our animal rescue work. It goes into the whole community as a whole to make sure all the cats we serve are being spayed and neutered before 6 months old. We want them fixed by 5. And so our primary audience is really those veterinarians, especially the private practice veterinarians who might still be making these outdated recommendations. And then, of course, along the way, we want to educate our cat parents and make sure they have access to this information. When they go to look it up, they're finding out about Fix by 5 and they're calling their veterinarians early to get on the schedule. And then animal welfare organizations or any group really that wants to talk about prevention and all the wonderful implications thereof, not just for the cats, but we're thinking outside the box too, reaching out to public health and public safety, other, local groups that might have an interest in promoting spay and neuter. And so our work, it's been an iterative process. We have seen that obviously the science is there to support this. And so it has been our work to find the right people to carry that message, to make sure the message itself is clear and concise and being shared in the right ways. And then we see that outcomes of that messaging in people actually getting those kittens spayed and neutered, then the wonderful things that happen when we're able to control those litters. And so it's been an iterative process. We've been working for a while now. So as I said, Esther had this idea for Fix by 5, and she found the right people and started working collectively to give this idea life. And about 5 years of work went into it before it ever went to the task force. And so, but the task force convening, that was really kind of the core of this campaign and what it was built around. And so we brought veterinary professionals together into a room to look at the science and to put forth their official recommendations. Veterinarians want to hear from other veterinarians. They want to know what the science says. And so we knew that this message could not come from the average person. We knew veterinarians didn't want to hear from animal rescues, right? They want to know what other vets have to say. And so getting veterinarians into a room together was a critical part of our work. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge the contributions of Joan Miller, who was key in making our Feline Fix by 5 campaign come to life. She has or left an incredible legacy in spay neuter and in our campaign for sure. And so all the credit to Joan Miller and her outstanding work, and credit, of course, to Esther and all of the contemporaries who put in the work. Again, 5 years of work before we could even have this meeting of the task force, before these recommendations could even be made. And so it took a lot of time. It took a lot of relationship building, meeting the right people, staying persistent. It was a very grassroots effort, but over time, it grew to not just the AVMA, which is a national group overseeing the veterinary profession in the United States, but we have other associations like the ASV, the Association of Shelter Veterinarians. Even outside of the veterinary space, we have the ASPCA, we have the National Animal Care and Control Association, which oversees our animal control officers. Along with, we have, I think, 15 state level veterinary medical associations now. Indiana was the most recent one to join the group. And so we have lots of friends in lots of different places. But it didn't just start there, right? It started with one person with one idea who found the right people to help grow this idea into something more and more and more, with the right persistence and the right amount of tenacity and clear messaging. The campaign has evolved over time. And speaking of evolution, Feline Fix by 5 was not the first name of the campaign. There were other versions of this campaign, and then it evolved over time to become Feline Fix by 5 months, because the messaging matters. And so it took effort, right? It took trial and error a little bit to figure out what was sticking and what wasn't. And so Feline Fix by 5 proved to be the message that resonated. We continue to work on messaging that resonates. We found this graphic you see, I'm 5 months old and I'm pregnant. We found that to be very powerful. We're always creating ready to share resources. We want to make it easy for folks to download, copy, paste, share. So we have videos, we have graphics, we have a very comprehensive media kit, logos, anything that we can be doing to support people carrying out this message, because we want it to be as loud as possible. We want to build that critical mass. We don't want to be the only ones talking about Feline Fix by 5. We want every single veterinarian, we want every single animal rescue group, we want every single just anyone with an interest in spay neuter to be talking about Fix by 5. And so we are doing this to make sure that people are getting the message that need to hear it, and that as many cats as possible are being spayed and neutered. And just very quickly, February is our awareness campaign where we're really leaning into Feline Fix by 5. It's a collective effort. And it's very timely because for us here in the United States, it's right at the start of kitten season. If you're somewhere where kitten season is not all year long. But February is a great time for prevention for us. And then of course, there's a nice alliteration of Feline Fix by 5 February. But yeah, we build media kits, we have press releases, we have everything ready to share and available to make collective action simple, because the more voices, the better. So what have we learned along the way? Our campaign, 2016 was when that vet task force met for the first time. And so 2026 will be the 10-year anniversary of the official campaign. Like I said, 5 years of work before that. So what have we learned along the way? Again, we have worked to tweak and refine that message. We've learned that the simpler, the better. We have very short attention spans. So 3, 5, maybe 6 words. That's where it's at. Keep it simple. Finding the right people to carry your message is important, to be your messengers. Make sure that they have the credentials to go with it. Peer-to-peer works really well. Veterinarians want to hear from other veterinarians. And so making sure you have, again, it goes with the right messengers, but peers are a great resource. Invest in those relationships. It might not happen overnight, but relationships are so important. And remember that even the little shifts can create big change, whether it's 6 months to 5 months or some other little victory along the way. And then here's my quick call to action. You too can shift the norm and help us spread the word about Feline Fix by 5 QR code there on screen. And thank you so much for your time. I do want to just say that this campaign is very near and dear to our heart. It is not something that you need millions and millions of dollars to run. It's very grassroots. It might take time. It takes the right perseverance and the right tenacity, but making friends, honoring those relationships, and putting in the work, and it can pay off, and it can have a huge impact. And so, I want to thank you all for tuning into this presentation. My info is there on the screen. I hope to hear from you, and make sure you follow us on all of our socials. And I look forward to our Q&A.